Hello and welcome. My name's Ben Judah. I'm a senior fellow here at the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C. And welcome to our weekly conversations on Europe in the world. I'm delighted to be joined today by Ambassador Gérard Araud, former ambassador from France to the United States and the United Nations, for a conversation on Ukraine and Europe on the eve of the EU-Ukraine summit. How likely is it that Ukraine can become a full member of the European Union? Why are there some countries in Europe, including many in France, that are concerned about what such a prospect could look like? And is Ukraine being correctly advised about what lies ahead for it? Thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador.
Thank you, Ben. It's a real pleasure. No, I don't think there is a debate in Europe whether Ukraine will join the European Union. The debate is more about when and how and what are the conditions, And I think it's very useful that we have this conversation with especially with American correspondents, because during all my career, I have felt that for the Americans, joining the EU basically was the usual solution by default when there was an European problem. And I suspect that it's first because it doesn't cost a dime to the Americans, so it's good policy for them. But more, I think the Americans don't realize what means being member of the European Union. The European Union is not an organization like the United Nations. You join and you are a member of the club. Actually, being member of the European Union, for instance, means that you are joining a single market. And joining a single market means that you should have the same regulations or equivalent regulations to the other members of the single market for reason of fair competition, but also for the safety of the consumers. So it means actually thousands of pages of regulations which have to be transferred to the new member, to the aspirant member. And if you consider that Ukraine is coming from a very different socio-political, economic background, you can conclude that it will be quite a feat. Actually, that for the Ukrainians to reach the level of regulation of the European Union, it will be a long process. Usually when a European country decides that you want to join the European Union, the process takes 5, 6, 7 years before becoming effectively a member of the European Union. And in the case of Ukraine, you have another problem, because joining the single market, in a sense, you are in exchange of joining the single market, in exchange of opening your market to the European products, you are supposed to receive actually subsidies from the European Union, so you can adjust, you can join the rank of the European country very quickly. And this financial support is something like a few points of the GDP. Right now, Poland is receiving every year several points of GDP in terms of EU subsidies. And suddenly, we would have Ukraine. Ukraine is much poorer than Poland, and Ukraine has a huge agriculture. So it means that all the European Union system will be under tremendous tension and financial tension. It couldn't afford, if I may say, Ukraine in the current circumstances. So there will be a lot of questions, and including actually how the European Union works. So, of course, Ukraine is a European country. We have decided it will join the European Union, but it won't be tomorrow. It will take several years. And when we say that, it's not bad faith, it's not bad will, that's the reality. It doesn't prevent us, actually, from doing things with the Ukraine before it joins the European Union.
I was really shocked to see that if Ukraine became a full member of the Common Agricultural Policy, that because of its land surface and the scale of its agriculture, that almost all CAP funding would go to Ukraine. What would that do to the deal around European Union membership in a country like France or Spain or Italy? Suddenly to see all those subsidies move to supporting the good farming folk of hopefully Zaporizhia region and Kherson Oblast.
No, exactly. I think I didn't want to enter into technical details, but you're right. The common agriculture policy, which has been around since now for 50 or 60 years, would simply collapse. And if you want to adjust it, it would mean much less financial support to the farmers everywhere in Europe. It's not only in France, it's Spain, but Italy, Greece, but also the Netherlands, and so on. So it means, as I've said, that the candidacy of a country like Ukraine, so much poorer, because a lot of people are forgetting that actually, of course, Ukraine is devastated by the war, but even before the war, Ukraine was a poor country compared to most of the European countries and compared to the members of the European Union. So it means that if we want to have Ukraine as a member state, first on the Ukraine side, we need a lot of adjustment. But I think we would need also to adjust our policies, which is, of course, politically sensitive in all of our countries.
So, we're on the eve of the EU-Ukraine summit. What's going to be discussed there and what should be discussed there, given these realities?
But actually, first, it's not really an EU summit because you have the Commission going to, so it would be more terms of Commission, really talking about the European Union, the European Union, how to move forward the candidacy of Ukraine. I think that's the first point. It's very important that for a country as far as Ukraine from our economic system, financial system, and even I would say, and I think you are a specialist of it, but the problem of corruption, also the problem of the rule of law. The European Union is also based on the rule of law, and you can say that it's the case in Ukraine. So there is a lot of questions. So that to say, here is the process. We want to join the European Union. We want to help you. So how can we help you? Second point, there is a problem, as I've said, really before Ukraine joins the European Union, we can have a lot of cooperation in a lot of different fields. And third, and there is the emergency, it's really in I think two steps. The first step is the emergency financial support. Really, what will be the amount of it and how the money is spent in Ukraine. And also, we have unfortunately to prepare the hypothesis of a long conflict, and which means also a long support coming from the European Union. So there are really a lot beyond the question of membership, which is politically very symbolic and very, very important, but to be frank, which is a bit of faraway prospect. But even if we have to reaffirm the principle, there are a lot of practical issues of today and tomorrow that I think the summit in Kiev, could be very useful.
So, when do you think Ukraine could become a member of the European Union? Are we talking 3, 4, 5 years? Are we talking 10, 15 years? And if it is a long way, what about the European political community? This idea of an outer ring of members launched really under the stewardship of Emmanuel Macron last year.
First, if you ask the first question, and again, my answer is a technical answer, and it's not a political answer. It's if you want to, considering the conditions, considering the situation, it would take more than 10 years to the Ukraine to join the European Union. Of course, it doesn't really, the European Union may change its conditions. Really, the European Union can take a bold step, but frankly, it would have major political, social, and financial consequences if it does it. So really, but under the current circumstances, the way our enlargement has been done to 27 countries, it will take more than 10 years. you are raising the right question. I think that I don't know if it will be the political, really the political project of Emmanuel Macron you are referring to, or another way. And I think, in a sense, it goes beyond maybe Ukraine, also to some countries in the Balkan regions, because you have countries like, to be frank, like Bosnia Herzegovina, really, or Northern Macedonia. You can dream of having them, really tomorrow in the European Union. They don't have the political, the economic, the social, really all the conditions to be members of the European Union. But I think we should try to extend, to create a strong partnership with these countries. There was, really, before the war, there is what was called the Eastern Partnership, created, really, I think with the initiative of Poland and other Eastern countries. So maybe we should really revisit it, maybe to give more substance, to it. Because obviously what is happening in Ukraine has dramatically changed the conditions in Europe.
Well, are there ways that we can start to build EU institutions into Ukraine before it's a member of the European Union, that we can have EU bureaucrats helping Ukraine supervise, for example, contracting, given the depths of corruption, bring Ukraine into aspects of, bureaucratic management, like have European officials in the ministries? Is that feasible? Has that been done before?
I think, yes, it has been done before. But of course, it depends also on it's not a colonial endeavor. And so it has to be done also in a sensitive way. And it has also to respond to a real request, not only from the government, but also from the society, from the bureaucracy of the country. But we can do it, and we have an experience of doing it, of helping new aspirants to become new members. Again, becoming members of the European Union is quite difficult. As I have said, we have a single market, which means that we have built, regulations, justice system, rule of law system, and a country which may have quite a different system is called to join it. So there is an adjustment which can be very deep into the being of the country. But of course, in Ukraine, the challenge is going well beyond what was really admitting countries like Croatia or Slovenia into the European Union. So we will need certainly supporting Ukraine, not only supporting Ukraine in the terms that you described, which are important, but also there will be some financial support. Really, even before Ukraine is joining the European Union is going to support financially Ukraine, I think, on the long term.
So I want to come back to what you said about a long war, because that's really the mood in Washington, in other capitals in Europe, that we've given this impressive military support, but there's a strong possibility this could last really for years. If it does look like it's lasting for years, is there some kind of political deal where Ukraine can be encouraged to settle for less than it might have hoped for in exchange for accelerated EU membership or possibly NATO membership? Is there some way these Western clubs can come into play for freezing the conflict?
So, as you know, there is the atmospherics of the war. There is the excitement I can understand, because the courage of the Ukrainians, the suffering of the Ukrainians. And I do think that right now it's very difficult to talk about it. And I think we are going to have the Russian offensive, very likely, maybe an Ukrainian one. So I think that, war has its own tempo. And I do think that right now, unfortunately, the tempo is to fighting and only to fighting. But in the spring, or maybe in the beginning of the summer, considering the outcome of the offensives, Russian and Ukrainian, we may actually have a look at it. We may have really going to what you said, I was extremely struck and struck in for two reasons. First, that General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff's U.S. staff, said twice that it's very unlikely that Ukrainians could recover all the occupied territories. So I was struck by this declaration. I was struck also because the press didn't echo it, didn't make really. For me, it was formidable. Because it means, if you are really logical, it means that if we consider that the victory, the outcome, the only acceptable outcome is to Ukraine to recover its territories, and if Ukraine is not going to do it, it means that we are supporting an endless war, that we are, at least a long war, 2, 3, 4 years. And a long war means hundreds of thousands of fatalities, but also the total devastation of Ukraine. And I don't think it's our national interest of each European country. I'm not in charge of the Ukrainian national interest. So I do personally, but I think it's very difficult to say that at this moment without being considered as a defeatist or as really a supporter of Russia. But I do hope that in the spring or summer, I think that the Western countries, and especially the United States, will have a look at whether a negotiation is possible, really. And frankly, I think that the Biden administration has managed this crisis pretty well. Because they have been extremely firm and proactive in supporting Ukraine, but at the same time, they have been very keen on avoiding escalation, whatever the rhetoric or also on the ground. And I may be wrong, but I know a bit Washington, D.C., but I feel that the Biden administration wouldn't refuse the idea of a negotiation at some moment of the war. I was struck by a recent study a few days ago, I think it was published, by the RAND Corporation. And I don't know if you read this study, but the RAND Corporation is not supposed to be such a defeatist institution. And it was, I guess, a good point about the need to go back to the idea of negotiation. It's not very easy considering the public opinion, considering the atrocities committed by the Russians and the fact that the Russians are the aggressors. But I think that it would be necessary at least to think about it and to see whether something is possible. But again, it takes two to tango. It will depend also on Russia.
And do you think that EU membership or accelerated EU membership or some new form of EU membership, like an associate membership status, could be a sweetener if the Ukrainians are going to have to realize that they can't recover Melitopol or Mariupol in the conceivable future?
I think, I guess that's more than an EU or quasi-EU. I think it will be more a NATO or quasi-NATO really point, really. Because, again, a lot of people are rightly really emphasizing that you can't trust the Russians and that even if you have an agreement or an armistice or a ceasefire, because I think that the more likely to get an armistice or a ceasefire than a political settlement, it would be simply a way for the Russians to prepare a new assault, which makes sense. But it means also that on the other side, it means that we will need to have some guarantee given to Ukraine. It won't be NATO membership immediately, because really, if it's NATO membership, we are supposed to support a member, so we will be immediately called to intervene in Ukraine. But really thinking in terms of military guarantee or a type of declaration of maybe NATO official declaration, really saying that if Russia relaunch an operation, NATO will bring all its strength behind Ukraine. Really, I think it will be, considering the war, it will be certainly the most important sweetener, and certainly part of, if there is if there is an agreement here, it's totally hypothetical, and that's the diplomat who is trying to dream about it. And after that, of course, there will be maybe more than the EU or quasi-EU or EU association, I should say a sort of a Marshall Plan of rebuilding Ukraine. And of course, the EU will be, I should say, I hope, and I think it should be, EU will be a major or the major shareholder, if I may say, in this rebuilding of Ukraine.
Ambassador Gérard Araud, former Ambassador of France to the United States and the United Nations and other places, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Ben.